This is MPR News on Election Day 2021, Tuesday, the 2nd of November. I'm Tom Cran, and our coverage begins tonight on a consequential election, especially in the state's largest city, Minneapolis. Yes, a lot of attention tonight on Virginia, New Jersey, and their gubernatorial off-year elections, and we'll check in and have updates on that. But we have our eyes, as does much of the nation, on Minneapolis. A lot of attention and a lot at stake. The future of policing in the city. The mayor of the city of Minneapolis on the ballot, as is the mayor's power on the ballot as well. The mayor on the ballot in St. Paul, and also questions in both cities on rent control as well. But I think the big story tonight, Brant Williams, who's here with me, has to be the question 2, the charter amendment.
That's right.
About police, the future of policing. Will the city of Minneapolis choose to go with a Department of Public Safety and, in effect, replace the police department with that?
That's right, Tom. And right now, with 91.9% of precincts reporting, right now it looks like no. People do not want to replace the Minneapolis Police Department with a public safety department.
Okay.
So that's one of the top lines right there.
Right. 57% almost voting no, 43% voting yes, and that's with over 90% of the precincts reporting right now. We have our eyes on these results. We are on the air a little earlier than we expected because we have results. We also have our eye on the mayor's race. And Jacob Frey right now on the ranked choice voting system and as first choice has 43% of the vote, shy of the 50% threshold to not then have to go to second choice and all. But behind him is Sheila Nejad with 20.5%, and Katie Knuth with 18.5%. That's in the mayor's race. We are keeping track of the first choice votes. If Mayor Frey, to win a second term, does not cross that threshold of 50%, then we will not know the results until tomorrow because they have to be calculated and tabulated, I believe is the term
correct.
they use, right, Brant? So tell us here, remind us as we look at this, where we have been on this question and this issue of policing in Minneapolis since the murder of George Floyd back in May of 2020 on May 25th.
That's right, Tom. Well, you remember that shortly thereafter, a group of 9 Minneapolis City Council members gathered at Powderhorn Park. They stood on a stage with the lettering "Defund Police" right in front of it, and they pledged to overhaul the Minneapolis Police Department, saying that reform was no longer possible. It really needed to be overhauled in order to bring about the type of change and to prevent the deaths of particularly African Americans at the hands of police. They figured that the best way to do that is to just start with a different structure. And so they went out there, they made this pledge, and not long after that, they came out with a council-led proposal to amend the charter last year to eliminate the Minneapolis Police Department and replace it with another agency. Now, that particular effort did not succeed because the Charter Commission essentially ran out the clock. They felt like they needed more time to get more information about this. They felt like it was rushed. And so they basically said, we need more time to consider this. And by law, they had that time. And so it was not able to get on the ballot in 2020. Now, fast forward to this year, we had a citizen-led petition that was started at grassroots, a petition that was started, a movement started, and they gathered more than 20,000 signatures of citizens who said they wanted to have this opportunity to vote for overhauling the police department. They got their wish. They got a ballot on they got a question in front of voters this fall, but right now it does not look like the rest of the city is going along with that.
All right, and we will continue to bring you numbers when they come in. Minneapolis is pretty quick on election night with results, at least those until the ranked choice voting complicates it. And but last time in 2017, you'll recall, Brant, that we knew that Mayor Frey had 25% of the vote in the first round. and the next day, after 5 rounds of counting, he crossed that 50% line and won with 57.2%. So that's what we have our eye on tonight. The other thing we have our eye on is, you mentioned, 9 members of the Minneapolis City Council were on that stage in Powderhorn Park. And there were different words that were used, but ranging from defund police, which it said on the stage, to dismantling the Minneapolis Police Department, to scrapping it, to replacing it. All of that was used, and 7 of those council members are on the ballot tonight.
That's correct.
And we have our eye on those races. Two of the people who were on the stage that night have chosen not to seek re-election, right?
That's correct. Those 2 seats, Alondra Cano of Ward 9 chose not to run again, and Lisa Bender, the city council president in Ward 10, also decided not to run again. So those are 2 open seats.
So we will give you a rundown on how that is looking as well. About 4 minutes here to 9 o'clock. Let's bring in our Matt Sepik, who is in Minneapolis. He's in, Matt, you're in the St. Anthony, Maine neighborhood with supporters of Mayor Frey, and how are they feeling right now? He is ahead of where he was 4 years ago, but has not crossed the 50% line.
Not quite, but only about 11 more precincts yet to report, so that could change here in the next few minutes, Tom.
Yeah.
I would say that the mood is certainly optimistic. The mayor has not arrived yet, but I expect that he will soon. Television cameras are here, all set up to hear what Mayor Frey has to say. Once we get more definitive results, it would appear in this election tonight.
What about question 2? The results on that, the public safety amendment, that seems to be, with over 90% of the precincts reporting, a pretty resounding no at this point, about 57% no and 43% yes. And I imagine there are some opponents of that measure who are supporters of Mayor Frey, because he himself was an opponent of that.
Right. Mayor Frey has opposed the charter amendment all along, both the council versions and the previous versions that Brandt mentioned, the council version and the one that made it to the ballot, that is from the citizen petition. He and Police Chief Madeira Arredondo all have spoken out against this measure, saying that there's really not enough there. There's not a plan for what supporters of Question 2 want to replace the MPD with, if that measure were to pass. But as you mentioned, Tom, it does not look like it is going to tonight.
Now, Jacob Frey has, it's always tough to unseat an incumbent, so he has that fundraising advantage as well, but he got a pretty good challenge from 3 other candidates when it came to fundraising as well, right?
Yeah, but the mayor, of course, out fundraised both of his main challengers. Right. By quite a bit, and of course, the mayor has the backing of the business community, and he has the power of incumbency. So it's much easier to raise funds, to pay staff, to pay for lawn signs and all of that stuff. When you're a known quantity, when you're an incumbent, it's always a challenge for challengers to come up from behind in that regard.
All right, our Matt Sepik, we will be checking in with you again live here on NPR News tonight at what will be, in effect, Mayor Jacob Frey headquarters once the mayor arrives there. We're told by Matt he hasn't arrived. Mayor Frey is shy of the 50% needed, that threshold, but in first choice votes, he stands with the leader of the pack with 42, almost 43% in. Or 43% of the vote, I should say. Sheila Nejad with about 21% of the vote, and Kate Knuth with about 19% of the vote. But I think the big story so far tonight is we're going to break here and find out what's going on around the country. But Brandt, in just 45 seconds, the big story tonight is question 2, and that is the public safety charter amendment.
That's right, Tom. And also, we're taking a look at some of these council races where council members who supported Question 2 are facing tough challenges. And there's a couple that look like will be unseated. And so I'm just going to keep looking at these numbers, and we'll update you
after the news. But we just have heard that the Associated Press has now called the Question 2 no, because right now, with over 90% of the precincts reporting, 57% of Minneapolis has voted no to 43% yes. It's NPR News.
Programming supported by Allina. Cancer changes everything, so at Allina Health Cancer Institute, they're reimagining cancer care. Learn more and meet the expanded team of cancer care experts. Connected seamless care close to home. allinahealth.org/cancer.
Just from the Associated Press, a call that the numbers support now, that it looks as though Minneapolis will remain with a police department. It will not be replaced with a Department of Public Safety, with about 92% of the precincts reporting. The no vote is at 57%, the yes vote at 43%. We have our eye on that. The mayor's race, the city council races, and no numbers in yet from St. Paul, where the mayor and a rent control question are on the ballot as well. We'll keep you up to date on this election night 2021 on the air here on 91.1 KNOW Minneapolis, St. Paul, and online at nprnews.org at 9 p.m. Here's what's going on around the country.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. President Biden says Democrats have reached an agreement on a plan to lower the price of prescription drugs for seniors. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports it's a big step toward resolving the party's differences over Biden's social services and climate legislation.
The politically popular measures were left out of the initial framework unveiled by President Biden before he left for his trip to Rome and Glasgow. But just before he was set to return to Washington, congressional Democrats announced a deal on drug pricing. The White House says the deal, quote, discourages drug companies from abusing laws to prolong their monopolies. The industry's main trade organization said it would hurt innovation. The agreement would specifically allow Medicare to negotiate prices on certain drugs and cap out-of-pocket spending for seniors at $2,000 a year. Drug companies that refuse to negotiate could face financial penalties. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Washington.
CIA Director William Burns is in Moscow for meetings with his Russian counterpart during a period of high tensions between the two countries. As NPR's Greg Myrie notes, this is the latest of several low-key meetings between the two countries with the hope of stabilizing the relationship.
U.S. and Russian officials confirmed the meeting, but did not provide details on the talks between CIA Director Burns and the head of Russia's Security Council. As a former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Burns has been dealing with points of friction between the two countries for many years. President Biden this summer warned Russian President Vladimir Putin against ransomware attacks, but U.S. officials say Russian hackers have continued the practice. Despite the poor state of relations, Biden administration officials have been holding a series of low-key discussions with Russian officials on issues including arms control. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
Democrat Eric Adams has been elected New York City mayor based on preliminary vote totals, appearing to handily defeat Republican Curtis Sliwa. Meanwhile, in another closely watched race, the Virginia governor's contest, Republican Glenn Youngkin has a sizable lead over Democrat Terry McAuliffe. That race still deemed too close to call, though. It's one of the best-remembered forecasts in Wall Street history. It finally has happened. The Dow closed above 36,000 for the first time ever. NPR's David Gurr reports it's a milestone that was 22 years in the making.
Back in 1999, a journalist named James Glassman and Kevin Hassett, an economist, published a book with a bold prediction that the Dow would hit 36,000. The Dow was trading at a fraction of that at the time, and the two authors predicted it would take several years to hit that milestone. The prediction was ridiculed, but 22 years later, it's come to pass. The Dow rose 0.4% on Tuesday to close above 36,000, the latest in a string of record highs. David Gura, NPR News, New York.
Blue chips rose 138 points. The Nasdaq was up 53 points. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia. For 30 years, committed to advancing educational innovations and research that improves pre-K to 12 learning. More at edutopia.org.
Support comes from Mall of America, offering the reminder it's ho-ho-go time. With over 500 stores, Mall of America is the get-it-done shop for every Santa. Visit mallofamerica.com/holiday.
Election night 2021 live coverage here on NPR News on a consequential night for the city of Minneapolis. Our headline tonight, if the trends we are seeing hold, and there's over 90% of the precincts reporting, well, Mayor Frey is reelected as a stronger mayor with a police department to control. I think that's the way things look tonight. I'm Tom Cran here with Brant Williams, and Brant has his eye on some city council races. But first, Brant, I just want to run the numbers here on the headline. We are looking at the Minneapolis mayoral election. 94% now of the precincts in, and Jacob Frey with 42%, almost 43% of the first choice vote. It is not enough for him to be declared a winner, but it's he is the leader, with Sheila Nejad second at 21% almost, and Kate Knuth at 18.5%. So we'll see when those precincts report if it puts Mayor Frey over the 50% threshold, where the ranked choice mechanism does not have to kick in. The Associated Press has declared that question number 2, the no vote, is the winner. So the question that would replace the Minneapolis Police Department in the city's charter with the Department of Public Safety, with, again, over 94% of the precincts in, it's at 56.5% for the no vote and 43% for the yes vote. And then the question of mayoral power as well is on the ballot tonight, and it does look like that is passing as well. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, Brant, but I know you have your eye on a couple of city council races, especially with members of the council who were in support of question 2.
That's right. I've been looking at especially a couple of the Northside races in Ward 4 and Ward 5. Incumbent Philippe Cunningham, who is one of the spearheaded a lot of the efforts to remake the Minneapolis Police Department. He's actually put a lot of work into some of the reforms and alternative policing options as well. And right now, Philippe Cunningham is being defeated by Latricia Vitaw, who is also a DFLer, but Latricia Vitaw opposes question 2. And Latricia Vitaw has 60% of first choice ballots with 8 of 8 precincts reporting. That's what I'm looking at right now. So it appears that Latricia Vitaw is going to be the new council member for Ward 4. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, I'm looking at Ward 5. Jeremiah Ellison is in a tight race in these first choice ballots right now. He's got about 31%, about 32% of those first choice ballots, but he's being opposed very closely by Christelle Porter and Victor Martinez. Now, again, that means they're going to be running those votes off tomorrow, and so we'll have to wait until tomorrow before we find out, or maybe later, to find out what happens with Jeremiah Ellison as well.
And then we should also look at the strong mayor question. And I have the numbers on that as well. And that question on the ballot basically would change the city charter to its form of government to an executive mayor legislative council model. And that looks like it is passing 53% to 47% no. So again, it looks like if Mayor Frey, if the pattern holds here, he will be reelected as mayor, and a stronger mayor with control over the police department. You're listening to live coverage of Election Night 2021. I'm Tom Cran. A lot of attention on the Minneapolis vote tonight. We're here with Brant Williams, and also we are looking for numbers in the city of St. Paul and not seeing any. Polls have been closed now for an hour in St. Paul. Mayor Melvin Carter on the ballot there with a number of challengers, and also a rent control question on the ballot in St. Paul. So let's talk now public safety and the future of public safety. Here with us tonight, a law professor from the University of Minnesota we've talked to before on these issues, Maria Ponomarenko, co-founder of the Policing Project at NYU. And first, I just want to get your reaction tonight to the fact that the AP has called the election for the no vote when it comes to replacing the police department. Does that surprise you?
I don't know that it surprises me. There was a lot of confusion about what exactly ballot question 2 was asking. And so it doesn't surprise me that, at a time of uncertainty, ultimately people leaned no.
What do you think it means for the future of police reform and for community activism for the past year and a half, which on that issue, which has been strong, and tonight it does not seem like those who were proponents of that are faring well? What does that say about the city of Minneapolis?
I have to say, I think it would be a mistake to read too much into the results. So, I think particularly when it comes to the public's appetite for, really significant reform and even this broader notion of, reassigning certain functions away from the police department, I think it's just not possible to look at this result and say that the public is actually rejecting that broader vision. There was just a lot of misinformation and also just, frankly, confusion about exactly what the ballot measure was asking people to vote on. And so I think in some ways it might just be a statement about the ballot question process itself, much more than, the kind of future of policing in Minneapolis, which I think everybody agrees needs to change in a pretty fundamental way.
Right. Professor, this is Brant Williams. I was going to ask you just along those lines, there was a lot of discussion when this ballot proposal was put out there that there was not enough information included in that. But, supporters of it said, look, for charter amendments, it's not really something that gets, they present a skeleton that gets filled in later by the city council. I just wonder if maybe there's just a little bit too much still that was missing that people just could not feel comfortable making a decision on either way.
Yeah, I don't know if I would even, fault the proponents of the charter. I think there is something about the kind of charter amendment process that has to be general. There's only so much that people can take in and process. But I think when it comes to these sorts of, big kind of government restructuring mechanisms, it doesn't surprise me that people want more certainty than they could possibly get from the kind of very short question being asked.
So as you see it, Professor, you don't see that this loss tonight would in any way stall or thwart any efforts at police reform in the city of Minneapolis. It would just have to be the Minneapolis Police Department that is reformed.
I think that's right. I mean, I think, I don't want to understate the blow this is for, the many activists that have worked really, really hard over the past year to try to bring this measure to fruition. But, I think there's actually still a very broad appetite for reform and lots of opportunity to do that within the municipal structure that currently exists.
On our airwaves this week, we heard if it can't pass in Minneapolis, it can't pass anywhere. What does it do when it comes to you look at these issues in a wider national framework? What do you think it says about similar efforts in other places?
I'm not sure that I would say if it can't pass here, it can't pass anywhere else. Minneapolis was the kind of site of the original uprising, but there's always been a little bit of a reluctance here to kind of take really bold measures. And there's been lots of cities that have actually taken much, much bolder strokes than Minneapolis or Minnesota as a whole. And so, lots of cities have started to shift functions away from the police department around traffic enforcement and other functions. Actually, even just right next door in Brooklyn Center, we've seen a much more wholehearted embrace of kind of a public health approach to policing and public safety. And so I think it's possible. I wouldn't, say that the Minneapolis vote really dooms the national effort.
Professor, as far as the the chances that there should be a statewide remedy for some of these policing issues in Minneapolis, there's been folks who have gone and lobbied their legislators at the Capitol for years now, trying to get some of types of measures that will empower these cities to pass the kind of reform they want to see with their police departments. I'm just wondering, do you feel like do you see there's an appetite among state legislators to actually jump in and pass laws that will help cities like Minneapolis bring about the types of reforms that they're looking to do?
I think there's been a huge appetite among state legislators, but unfortunately not in the state of Minnesota. So I think there were another number of really important measures that passed the House that just couldn't squeeze by in the Minnesota Senate. And I think when it comes to kind of statewide reform, a number of peer states like Colorado and Virginia and New Mexico have gone much, much further over the past year. So I think nationwide there's a lot of legislative appetite for this sort of reform. Minnesota's frankly lagged.
Mm-hmm. So what is next if for Mayor Frey, if his lead holds here and he is wins a second term? What does he need to say and do about police reform right out of the gate?
Mayor Frey has made clear that he buys into this notion that we can't send the police to deal with every social problem, that there's lots of issues that other kinds of first responders are better at dealing with. And I think now's the time for him to really bring that to fruition. So, there's a very small Office of Violence Prevention in the city that can be expanded dramatically. He could be pushing for serious investment in community-based alternatives and public health alternatives. And, the message from his office throughout this campaign over Measure 2 has been that we don't need to amend the charter. We could do all of the things that advocates are asking for. And, now is really the time to deliver.
Professor Maria Ponomarenko, a law professor at the University of Minnesota, thank you very much for your time on this election night and your insight into this issue of police reform and the future of policing in the city of Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's NPR News. It is 9:17 now on this Tuesday, Election Day, November 2nd, 2021. I'm Tom Cran along with Brant Williams. And tonight, the news is the Associated Press has called the Charter Amendment Question 2, which is the Police Reform Amendment, if you're just joining us, that the no vote is prevailing there right now with, well over 90% of the precincts in, about 57% no, 43% yes. And Brant, you've had your eye on city council seats tied to the support of that charter amendment. And in the 11th ward, Jeremy Schroeder was on that stage declaring the desire to replace the Minneapolis Police Department. His challenger tonight appears to have won, one of his challengers, Emily Koski. The numbers there, she has crossed that 50% threshold, 58.3%. Jeremy Schroeder, 30%. So I understand that Emily Koski is on the line. She is the next council member from Ward 11. That's in South Minneapolis, right, Brant, the southern part of the city.
That's correct.
Emily Koski, thanks for joining us and congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Yes, we are celebrating and so excited.
Now, what do you make of tonight's vote when it comes to the charter amendment? Because you have urged a no vote on that, correct?
Correct. Yes, yeah. I did urge a no vote, and I am excited about that outcome as well. And I think we still have a tremendous amount of work to do, and I'm ready to get started too. So.
Now, was this issue and the issue of the yes versus no vote on question 2 really the issue that drove your candidacy in your ward?
It absolutely, was definitely one of the top issues of the ward. And, we'd get to the door and people would want to know, is she voting yes or is she voting no? And that was a huge differentiator. And it was also, a walking and supporting people and helping them educate about the proposals and the amendments as well. So,
and you think that tonight that the amendment has been defeated and you have won, and your opponent, the council member who supported it, do you think? What does it say about police reform and police reform efforts in the city of Minneapolis? In other words, can we draw any conclusions on this?
Yeah, I think we can draw the conclusion that, our city of Minneapolis, we want police reform, but we want a plan. And we want to make sure that we can work on that plan together and that all the voices of our community are part of that plan. And that was a piece that was missing before. And now we're going to be able to do that. And I think that our new elected leaders in city council, along with this not passing, we're going to be able to collaborate and connect and move ourselves forward in a way that our city wants. And that is making sure that we are doing both things. We are reforming our police department, and we are keeping our community safe with ways beyond just policing. And so we will be investing beyond just policing, but our police department will be staying intact. So.
And it looks as though the question concerning mayoral power has passed, and it looks like Mayor Fry, if his lead holds in the second round of balloting, will be a stronger mayor. So what do you make of that? You'll be on the council.
Yeah, I think that this is fantastic news. I was also supportive of this proposal, and I think having our mayor as our executive branch and having our city council as our legislative branch brings a ton of clarity. It is going to make us more efficient and effective, and it modernizes our city. And I'm really excited about this.
And in Ward 11, it looks as though the challenger, Emily Koski, has defeated Councilmember Jeremy Schrader 58 to 30% now. And so thank you very much for joining us tonight, and congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. So thank you so much. We're so excited. We're excited to get to work. So.
All right. Well, congratulations. It's NPR News on Election Night 2021, a consequential election in the city of Minneapolis. Brant Williams, you also, there is an example of a council member who supported the charter amendment, the public safety amendment, who lost re-election. And you have your eyes on other seats with similar council members.
That's correct. I'm looking right now at Ward 3 race, which the incumbent is Steve Fletcher, who is another one of those council members like Philippe Cunningham,
right,
who put a lot of work into redesigning the public safety system in Minneapolis. And right now, he is in the middle of a very tough race with Michael Rainville, who's another DFL challenger. Rainville right now has 44% of those first choice ballots. Steve Fletcher has 39% of those. So this, and there's 11 of 13 precincts reporting. So we'll wait to see what happens after those last two precincts report. But this one looks like it's likely going to a runoff tomorrow.
We're looking for numbers in St. Paul and finding very few, but a couple, just to give you an idea that things are up and running in St. Paul. And it looks like Mayor Melvin Carter right now, with a very small, about 1% of precincts in, is at 54% of the vote. And also looking at the rent control question in St. Paul, which would actually limit rents by 3%, whereas in Minneapolis, the rent control question would give the city council authority over rent control. But anyway, it looks as though, yes, that is prevailing right now, again, with a very small percentage in, 55% to 45%. So we got our eye on that, and we'll let you know when there is movement there as well. But I think our top story tonight, if you're just tuning in, and that is the AP has called one of the races, one of the questions on the ballot, question 2, that would replace the police department as the no vote prevailing. And that's, 57% almost to 43%. And that's with 97% of the precincts reporting. So that's pretty decisive loss for that amendment.
Tom, I'd also like to jump in here with, there are some incumbents who do support question 2 who are not falling. They're still doing well. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking through the list here. We have like Andrea Jenkins, who is a Ward 8 council member. She's looks like going to be reelected handily here. We're also looking at some of these open seats. I'm looking particularly in Ward 9. It looks like where Alondra Cano used to sit.
Yeah.
Jason Chavez, who is a DFLer who supports that charter amendment. He has 56% of that first choice vote and 9 of 9 precincts reporting. So it looks like Jason Chavez will be the new council member for Ward 9. And again, he does support the charter amendment for the policing.
replacing Alondra Cano, who chose not to seek re-election.
That's
we
right.
should say, Chair of Public Safety, and Brant Williams doing a very fine job on these numbers tonight, because this is on the election nights that I've been on. This is the most elaborate sort of display that we have from the Secretary of State's office.
Doing a lot of scrolling here,
a lot
Tom.
of scrolling because of all the wards and then all the choices for second and third choice as well. It's NPR News, and we are going to check in now with the campaign that was known as All of Minneapolis, and they urged a vote no on question 2. Leili Fatahi is on the phone with us, who has been leading that group. And what is your reaction tonight? It seems that your efforts have been successful.
I think what we've seen tonight is a public mandate by Minneapolis voters for a planful approach to transforming our city's system of policing and public safety, one that includes meaningful consultation with those communities that are most impacted by both violent crime and by over-policing and police brutality. And, now what it's really time for is the residents of Minneapolis to come together and hold accountable our next mayor and city council for rolling up their sleeves and doing that work of carrying out that public mandate.
One of the criticisms of the no vote and the no side here, you heard during the campaign and in debates you were involved in, is that voting no would just be the status quo. And if you feel that the Minneapolis Police Department, it needs reform or is broken, that this will not affect that. What's your reaction to that? And what's the next step moving forward?
A no vote was never about maintaining the status quo. The residents of Minneapolis, especially after the murder of George Floyd, have overwhelmingly been united around the fact that we must transform our system of policing and public safety, that it is not a system in the status quo that works for everyone, and especially it is failing our communities of color. The disagreement has always been about what is the correct pathway for getting there. And I think, what we've seen and what the voters have indicated tonight is that things like, the way police are recruited, the way police are trained, how they're held accountable, how they are disciplined, where we're making our investments in public safety beyond policing, that the plans and the approach to that matter to them, and being engaged in the decision-making around that is also important to them.
I have a question. This is Brant Williams. I'm just curious about, again, I keep coming back to this, the wording question. There was a lot of, there's legal back and forth about the actual language of this charter amendment. And I'm just wondering if when it all comes down to this, if for future reference, that the next time there's going to be something this consequential, that there be perhaps a better way of wording this type of question, or putting out the kind of education, that voter education that people would need to better understand what they're voting on. I'm just curious how you see that.
This was a particularly complex charter amendment and around an issue that was particularly charged and important to the residents of Minneapolis. I do think that, the controversy around the wording was largely around making sure that when voters got to the polls, they understood what the consequences were of voting yes or no. We ultimately ended up, because voters had such a keen interest in this issue and were so engaged, they largely sought out a lot of the answers to the questions. They did a ton of research on their own and showed up at the polls well informed. But in many instances, the process and possible wordings of the question could have undermined that.
And how do you think this bodes for Mayor Frey? It looks like he's still under the 50%, but do you think this also bolsters him?
I think, like everyone in the city, we are just watching the results coming in. I wouldn't presuppose to know what the results there are going to be.
But if in the results he prevails and wins a second term, what does this mean for him moving forward when it comes to the issue of police reform?
I think that, he, like anyone else that is elected in this election, we had a slate of basically every candidate indicating that policing and public safety was a top issue for them and bringing about that transformation. And so I think that, the folks that are reelected that are elected or reelected this election, are going to have to account for that to the voters. I think voters are really going to hold them accountable in a way that perhaps we haven't seen before.
Layli Fatahi, who led the group All of Minnesota, urged a no vote on question 2, the public safety charter amendment, and whose campaign in that regard was successful tonight, with the AP having declared the race with almost 98% in now, the no vote at 57%. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So that is the story that undoubtedly is making national news as it is here in Minnesota, and that is in the city of Minneapolis. It looks as though the Minneapolis Police Department, it will remain as the Minneapolis Police Department, under control by a more empowered Mayor Frey, if Mayor Frey's lead holds. He has not crossed that 50% threshold needed in the ranked choice voting, but he is the front runner right now with about, 44% of the vote. Brant Williams is here with me. I'm Tom Cran. Brant has his eye on some city council races. We'll get to that. We have full results online at mprnews.org, mprnews.org. You can follow along there. Keep your eye on the numbers and keep your ear tuned to the radio, to NPR News on this election night 2021. We're joined here by David Schultz for some analysis, some perspective on what we are seeing tonight, political science professor at Hamline University. Professor Schultz, always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Tom. Thank you for having me.
So what to pick from here first? Let's talk about the no vote for the question 2 to replace the police department with the Department of Public Safety. Did you expect this margin to be as broad as it is?
I didn't think it was going to be as broad as it is, but I was suspecting it was going to lose. And there's a couple of reasons why. One of them is the fact that I always suspected that this was going to be a race about mobilization, about the two sides, you're really trying to sort of come out to vote. But I always had the suspicion that there was both a broad, I'm going to call it silent majority out there, if I can use Richard Nixon's old line, of people who are going to be afraid of sort of crime, concerned about law and order issues, and in a city that's experiencing, significant increases in homicide. Well, I think a story just came out. You reported significant rise in carjackings. I think there was a fear factor here. I think that was one problem. I think the second issue is the fact that this is an issue that did not divide in the way that people thought. I think what you did a poll, NPR with Carol Levin and Star Tribune, that pointed out that that 3/4 of what people of color were opposed to this measure. And I think that's critical because you had a community of color that was divided on this issue. I think it's important. And then I think perhaps the last issue is that, remember, was it 18 months ago, 9 council members stood up in a park in Minneapolis and said, defund the police. And even though technically this ballot measure was not defunding the police, forever that's what the measure came to stand for. So I think it's a bad messaging. I think it was perhaps overreaching. I think it was the fear of crime. All sort of came together that I think made it, drove the results the way we're seeing today.
Now, let's talk about ranked choice voting, and let's talk about the fact that we can't declare Mayor Frey having won a second term because he hasn't crossed that 50%. But there was an effort here, and there were even people I noticed on social media, people who even changed their Twitter handles. No, don't rank Frey. There seemed to be, you also saw signs in neighborhoods that Jacob has to go, Jacob must go. There seemed to be a kind of anyone but Frey approach here, but it seems not to have worked. What do you make of that?
Well, first off, you're right. I mean, if we look at polls again, he seemed to have approval ratings hovering in the mid-30s. And generally with approval ratings like that, again, go back to the crime issue, you would think he would be an incredibly vulnerable incumbent, and he should have been. However, the fact that the opposition didn't really sort of coalesce behind a particular candidate, it was divided between 2 or 3 possible candidates. I think that worked in his favor. I think, second, the opposition didn't have the resources, the money, compared to Jacob Frey and his supporters. Right. And then I also think the fact that he took a position of saying, I'm going against ballot Proposition 2. We can reform police without that. I think he wins over the more, let's say, centrists, of the few Republicans there are in the city of Minneapolis, and sort of really captures kind of what, let's say, everything from, let's say, the center over to the right. And so I think he was just in a better position on a variety of issues that he could actually capture and do as well as he did. Now, we're presuming, we don't know, of course, right. But if he doesn't get to the 50% in the first round, he's in a pretty good position, I think, of going over at some point. I sort of did some quick calculations before this election and thought that if he got to about 44, 45%, that's where he needed to be to eventually go over the top with ranked choice voting.
And right now he's at 42.94%, if we really want to get specific on it. So that math looks good for him when you then put in the second choice votes?
I think it does at this point. Again, obviously no guarantee, but I'd say at this point, with over a 20-point lead at this point, and the fact that the opposition was not successful in getting enough people to say don't rank Mayor Frey. Again, right now I would say he looks pretty good in terms of his positions going in. And if we now look at also this ballot Proposition 1 for a second here, I know that hasn't been called yet, right? But assuming that passes, you've got ballot Proposition 1 passing. It looks like ballot Proposition 2 has failed at this point. The mayor winning re-election. This is potentially a significant shift also in Minneapolis politics, which moves the city from what will be a weak mayor system to a strong mayor system. I don't mean politically, but by charter. And that's going to have huge implications for city council's authority, the mayor's authority. I mean, this is actually pretty significant in terms of not just the policies and people who won, but in terms of the structure of the city government.
Professor, on that, this is Brant Williams. On question one there, this weak mayor, strong mayor question, I'm curious, we heard the Charter Commission members, this was their particular amendment that they brought forward, and they had interviewed department heads from across the city, and the department heads told members of the Charter Commission that the current setup is too difficult, and it's very frustrating for them to get anything done. Basically, they said Minneapolis is an outlier when it comes to this type of structure. I'm just wondering can you put that into perspective for us? If you're familiar with how other city governments are arranged, is this going to put Minneapolis back into more synchronicity with the rest of the state?
It's going to put us more into sort of a pattern with the rest of the country, because St. Paul, St. Cloud, and I think Duluth are the only other strong mayor cities in the state of Minnesota. But if we start to look at across the country, when you get to cities that are about 400, 500, 600,000 and larger like that, generally those cities across the country are strong mayor systems where what they do is they relegate the council to more traditional, let's say, policy-making, pass legislation, and they shift over to the mayor more of sort of the central authority for, let's say, the day-to-day operations and executive functions of the city. So Minneapolis, as a city, as we know, is rapidly growing now. It's well over 400,000 again, probably as large as it's ever been. It's going to continue to grow. This kind of puts it in a place for where other cities of comparable size and larger are in terms of their structure of government. And I think the Charter Commission people, although I can't obviously speak for them because I'm not on the Charter Commission there, they may have been thinking that as they studied other cities in terms of saying that, listen, as we're growing, we need to think about how we coordinate things. And this idea right now of saying that the mayor shares with council executive powers doesn't make sense. The way I described this charter amendment, for all of us who grew up learning what separation of powers, we learned that at some point in school, what this does is sort of asserts a traditional separation of powers. The city council is the legislative branch. It makes law, it makes policy, turns it over to the mayor to to basically execute and be the administrator. So this puts Minneapolis in line with, again, more traditional models that we see with big cities across the country.
Professor David Schultz of Hamline University, political science professor, good speaking with you. Thanks so much for your insight tonight on NPR News.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Election night 2021, 9:40 in the evening. I'm Tom Cran here with Brant Williams. Brant, you have been looking at city council races, and we have seen one supporter of the question number 2, which the failed amendment, has lost his seat, Steve Fletcher.
No, that's Fletcher is still in the battle.
That's right.
We're
still
talking
in
about
the
Schrader
battle. Schrader, yes.
And Philippe Cunningham is also.
That's right. And Jeremy Schrader and Philippe Cunningham as well. So forgive me on that. A lot of charts and graphs tonight to keep track of in numbers. But we are going to speak to a council member who is still in the race, although has not garnered enough to be declared the winner. But Jeremiah Ellison in the 5th Ward is at 32% of the first choice vote now, and his 2 challengers are just about 25%. So this is a tight one, and Council Member Ellison joins us now, and you are a supporter of Amendment 2, and it was voted down by the citizens of Minneapolis tonight. What's your reaction?
The opposition ran a successfully dishonest campaign, we were not able to talk to enough voters, let them know the truth of this amendment. Rumors about the amendment persisted.
What was dishonest about it? Tell us what, as you see it, what was dishonest about it?
I think that what was dishonest about the opposition's story.
Yes, you said they ran a dishonest campaign.
Yeah. I mean, every debate that started with, well, there will be no police, was just a flat out lie. And it was a successful narrative, right? Every notion that there was, quote unquote, no plan was at best intellectually dishonest and ignored was really a successful leverage of the city attorney's advice to us over a year ago. And so, I think would you dispute that it is, would you say that it is true that you also thought the police would be eliminated if this passed?
I don't necessarily have an answer to that tonight because I'm
cool.
I'm asking you the questions. There's no presumption in my question. There's no presumption in my question.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm just saying, if you're asking me what was dishonest, I would say the number one lie about the amendment was that it would eliminate the police. And we heard it on the doors, and opponents said it again and again. And there seemed to be no consequences for perpetuating that lie.
Now, it seems as though you are in first place now in the first ranking. But as you see it, do you have enough there of second and third choice? Is someone running the math here to see if you will remain as council member?
How
are you feeling about that?
There's a lot of different ways that the numbers could break, and I would say that I'm not going to bust out any crystal ball. I'm going to see where things fall. Certainly being in the lead is not a bad place to be. Mm-hmm. And we'll see if I can make up the number of points that I need in order to cross that 50% plus one threshold.
But what would you say about the loss of your other 2 colleagues who supported this? Is that the reason that they lost? Was support for this question a problem in this election?
I think that my colleagues and I, we certainly leaned into the past 2 years, leaned into the pandemic, leaned into a lot about public safety and police accountability. And the truth is that everybody who sought to change and solve a problem in our city is losing their elections. And I think that if a number of us have to lose our elections because we advocated for better, more affordable housing, right? Only council members were at the forefront and at the lead of that, right? The mayor's office trailed behind on a lot of these issues. If we had to lose our elections because we thought that we couldn't accept that the murder of George Floyd was simply the cost of doing business, all that tells me is that there are a majority, as of today, of voters in Wards 4 and Wards 11 that simply see see the murder of George Floyd as the cost of doing business. You know, we've got to fight hard, and we've got to tell a better story, and we've got to meet people where they're at and bring them along. But yeah, I'd say.
And let me ask you,
it's been a tough year to govern.
Yeah, let me ask you then, if for supporters of real reform, police reform in Minneapolis, does this mean tonight that chances of that are dimmer? How do you see that, or what would you say to the supporters of this amendment?
Well, look, the truth is that the opposition to Question 2 have no plan for reform. Have you seen one? I haven't. They have no plan for reform. They don't want reform. They think that every once in a while, a murder of George Floyd, a murder of Jamar Clark, they think that, you know, lying about untested rape kits, the police lying about untested rape kits, they think, you know, they think that police injecting people unlawfully with ketamine is acceptable. And that's the truth, right? That's what voters in Ward 4 are saying tonight. That's what voters in Ward 11 are saying tonight. And the opposition does not care about preventing the next George Floyd. If anybody who opposed Question 2 that said they were for reform wasn't being honest. Every single council member who's walked into office and ended up supporting Question 2 did not support Question 2 from day one. We supported it after years and years of realizing that without the Amendment 2, reforming the police in Minneapolis is a dead end. There is nowhere to go. And this council will find that out as well. And the next council will find that out as well. That there is no direction to go unless we pass an amendment very, very similar to Amendment number 2. There is no reform that's going to happen in Minneapolis without the passing of such a thing.
Councilmember Ellison, this is Brant Williams. Just curious about looking over. I covered a lot of the discussions and debate about the previous attempt to get this type of measure in front of voters last year, and then with this year. And there were some questions that I think some of the opponents had about the public safety structure, how that would bring about more accountability to a police department if there's another, boss over the police chief. When you got that question from people, how did you explain that to people? How this measure would have brought about the accountability that you're looking for?
Well, first, there's a number of steps to that answer, to that question. First, without the elimination of the minimums, right? Cities that have robust police forces don't even have minimums the way that we have. Without eliminating the minimums, there is no leverage. Everybody's saying with negotiations with the Federation.
And Councilmember Ellison, you're talking about the minimums, just for the audience to explain, the minimum numbers, officers.
The minimum number of officers enshrined in the charter. Right. No city has this, because with it in the charter, there is no hope that you can hold your police accountable, because it eliminates a big part of your negotiation power. Smart cities, like the city of Chicago, which has the most police per capita of any major city in the world, don't have minimums in their charter. So why do we? Right? The reason we have minimums in the charter is because the Federation knows that with those minimums, there is no hope of any reform, that all negotiations will simply make accountability for the police less and less likely. Second thing is that right now there is no public accountability for the mayor or the chief when passing policy. For example, you saw that the mayor and the chief secretly changed a policy regarding coaching.
Councilmember Ellison.
Announcement.
Councilmember Ellison, I hate to interrupt, but we have to move on tonight, because we understand Mayor Frey has begun speaking, and so we are going to bring our listeners that. But thank you very much, Councilmember Jeremiah Ellison, live here with us on NPR News, and I understand that Mayor Frey is speaking at in the St. Anthony, Maine neighborhood, and we'll be able to hear what he says here. He has just stepped up to the podium. So let's listen in. It's very quiet in the room, we are told by... Here he is, Mayor Frey.
With people that I so dearly love, with great friends that have stood with us through thick and thin, and still not caving, honoring the right thing to do no matter what. Putting aside ideology, putting aside politics, putting aside the slogans and the catchphrases to recognize the truth of what people need in our city. The truth of looking out first for those that are struggling most. We've had a couple of unprecedented, unpredictable, and whatever other superlative you can attach years. It has been heavy. And through it all, we collectively, as a city, have moved beyond that which we have previously been able to do. We've recognized the magnitude of this moment. In addition to being unprecedented, it has also been remarkable in the way that so many different people from 1,000 different backgrounds have rallied around a common cause. In the way that people will look out for those that are in the roughest points of their life during a pandemic. We'll recognize the magnitude of a moment following the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent unrest to see through true change. And before I get too far into a speech, I have some thank yous that I want to give. First and foremost, beyond all else, I want to thank Sarah. Those of you that know Sarah know that she's extraordinary. You know that she's tough, talented, skilled, brilliant. But the reason that I love Sarah more than anything in the entire world is she has a backbone of steel. Everything that we've been through over the last couple of years, collectively, individually, and us as a family, she did while passing the bar exam, having a baby simultaneously, and she's been that rock that picks me up and puts me back together every single night. Sarah, I love you more than anything in the world. I couldn't have done this without you. To two extraordinary teams that we have, both working at the city as well as on the campaign side. They have been through a whole lot together, and they have risen to the challenge each and every single day. I'd like all you to come up here on the campaign team. Joe Radinovich, where are you? Our campaign manager who's been there all the way. I'm dead serious. Get up here. All of you. You too. You too. Official side too. Get up here.
Yeah, all right. Here.
All right. Yeah. They're a little shy, apparently.
That is Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey taking a sort of victory lap because we cannot declare him reelected tonight because of the numbers yet. And that is because of ranked choice voting in the city of Minneapolis. He is leading with 43% of the first choice vote. 50% of that vote would put him past that threshold. He is not there yet, and it likely will go to several ballots, although he is doing better than he did in 2017. At this point, he had 25% of the vote in the first round, but by the 5 rounds of balloting, he won with 57.2% of the vote. So he is presumptive at this point and giving a speech to that effect tonight. If he is reelected, it looks as though he will be a stronger mayor with a Minneapolis Police Department. If you're just tuning in, the big story tonight is that Amendment 2, Question 2, has failed tonight with 57% voting no and 43% voting yes. I'm Tom Cran, and I am here with Brant Williams tonight as we continue to bring you live election night coverage here on NPR News on a consequential election for the city of Minneapolis. And Brant, You have your eye on some of the city council races. With all of the ranked choice voting, it is a lot to keep track of tonight.
That's right.
But two of the city council members who supported the charter amendment that did not pass tonight have also lost their seats, right?
Yeah, that's right. Jeremy Schrader in Ward 11, one of the council members who was on the stage at Powderhorn Park last year, he's been defeated by Emily Koski, the challenger, and also in Ward 4, Philippe Cunningham, who is actually one of the architects of a lot of the public safety reform work on the city council, was defeated by Latricia Vita. And so those are just two. We're still looking at other numbers. There are also some council members who have did not support the amendment, and they've been reelected. We're still getting all these numbers together.
Right,
We're going to have more information tomorrow when some of these go through their initial runoffs.
And we look at that, and we're looking for numbers in St. Paul because the top of the ticket in St. Paul, the mayor, as in Minneapolis. And tonight with, 40% of the vote in now, 40% of the precincts, or 38 of 95, just to give you context. Mayor Melvin Carter is at 59.7% of the vote. First choice voting, Dino Guerin is second with 12.5%. That race has not been called, not enough votes in, but also rent control, an issue in this election. And it's sort of getting bypassed tonight, but we should say with an equal number of votes in St. Paul, it appears the rent control question is passing, leading 54% to 46% no vote on that. That's rent control in St. Paul that would limit rent increases to 3% annually. And in Minneapolis, Brant, that was also a question. And it looks like the rent control question that the city council will be able to enact that because with a lot more of the vote in, well over about 98%.
That's right.
52.5% yes and 47.5% no. So it looks like a stronger Mayor Fry with a police department in Minneapolis and a city council authorized to deal with rent control.
That's correct. Yes, and I've been again going back through some of these council races because these are very interesting, just to see how these council members who supported question 2 have fared and those who opposed it. And here I'm looking at an interesting race in Ward 2, which is Cam Gordon, one of the longtime council members. Cam Gordon is also supported question 2. He has an opponent who also supports question 2, but Cam Gordon is behind right now. He's in a tough fight with Robin Wansley Warloba, who is a Democratic Socialist Party member. And they are in a very close race right now, and we can't call that one. So, again, both of these leading candidates were in support of question 2, but voters are still not convinced that Cam Gordon, at least in this first round, is the one that they want to continue on the city council. So it's very interesting to watch.
Well, a lot to keep track of tonight, and Brant Williams, especially on the city council races, I thank you for your eagle eye on those numbers and those seats, because this has been a narrative that began shortly after the murder of George Floyd, when the city council members appeared on stage, 9 of the 13, and said that the Minneapolis Police Department was beyond reform, and so it needed to be changed. The charter amendment needed to be changed, and there was a lot of back and forth on that, on the wording and lawsuits, and it has been put to the vote tonight. Right. And tonight, the latest numbers I can tell you, according to the Associated Press, who called it about an hour ago, it looks as though no at 56% and yes at 43%. We have a lot more online, and I mean a lot, with the numbers, especially in St. Paul, where they will continue to come in tonight because only 40% of the precincts have reported there. And that's at nprnews.org, where we also will have full coverage. We'll have coverage tomorrow morning and throughout the day here on NPR News as well. But an election night in Minneapolis, Brant, like like no other that I can remember, with
That's right.
attention, national attention, and also a variety of issues, but public safety and the future of Minneapolis police at the forefront of this.
That's right.
Thank you, Brant Williams. I'm Tom Cran, NPR News. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned. We'll get the news from the BBC just ahead.
Programming is supported by Concordia College in Moorhead, with a 91% medical school and a 96% law school acceptance rate by its graduates. More information at concordiacollege.edu.
Programming supported by Allina. Cancer changes everything, so at Allina Health Cancer Institute, they're reimagining cancer care. Learn more and meet the expanded team of cancer care experts. Connected seamless care close to home. allinahealth.org/cancer. Support comes from Neon, presenting Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart as Princess Diana. From the director of Jackie, it tells the story of how 3 days over Christmas changed the course of the royal family. Exclusively in theaters Friday.
NPR News, 91.1 KNOW Minneapolis, St. Paul, and online, full results at nprnews.org. As I said, we're going to get a news update, find out what's going on around the country on this election night. Minneapolis among the most watched places, and then as it happens from the CBC. So it is 38 now, upper 20s tonight, clearing tomorrow through the day with a high into the mid-40s. 10 p.m. This news is next.
Live from NPR News, I'm Shay Stevens. School-aged children are now eligible to be vaccinated against COVID-19. That's after CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky recommended Pfizer's lower-dose vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin reports.
Walensky's recommendation came just hours after a CDC advisory group voted unanimously in favor of recommendation. Her endorsement was no surprise. She addressed the advisors this morning at the outset of a day-long meeting and made clear she believes vaccinating this group is important and the right thing to do. The White House has been working on the logistics of the vaccine rollout for 5 to 11-year-olds. Officials say everything will be full steam by next Monday, November 8th. Parents will be able to find pharmacies near them with kids' vaccine doses in stock at vaccines.gov. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News.
President Biden says the world must keep accelerating its progress on combating climate change. NPR's Windsor Johnston has more on Biden's closing remarks at the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow.
President Biden told world leaders that acting on the climate crisis is not just a moral imperative, but an economic imperative as well. He also used his speech to make another pitch for investing in clean energy, adding that it's an enormous opportunity for countries to create good-paying jobs and spur a broad-based economic recovery. The UN Climate Summit wrapped up with pledges from more than 100 countries to curb emissions of methane and to end deforestation by 2030.
NPR's Windsor Johnston reporting. The Biden administration has a new plan to prevent suicide among members of the military and veterans. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports that the plan has a focus on gun safety and mental health care.
Suicide is higher, especially among younger veterans and troops, compared to their civilian peers. Experts draw a clear link to the fact that members of the military know how to use firearms, which are involved in the overwhelming majority of suicide deaths. The White House says this is not just a public health crisis, but a matter of national security. The top line of the plan is to encourage and teach safe storage of guns. Since suicide is often an impulsive act during a brief crisis, keeping guns and medications out of easy reach can save lives. The plan also includes lowering barriers to mental health care and monitoring financial troubles and legal issues that increase risk of veteran suicide. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
Virginia voters are awaiting the outcome of a cliffhanger gubernatorial contest that pits Democratic former Governor Terry McAuliffe against Republican former businessman Glenn Youngkin. Meanwhile, the Associated Press is projecting Democrat Eric Adams as the winner of a mayoral race in New York City.